Dead Rising 1 is one of my favorite games of all time. As a satire and commentary on America from the eyes of a Japanese studio, it proved to be a fun and refreshing idea that naturally sparked a full-on series of games, movies, and standalone DLC. But where Dead Rising 1 succeeded in showing the fragility of human nature and how quickly it can crumble as soon as the world starts to burn, Dead Rising 2 shows us that the evil was always there, waiting for a vent to bubble out from. Initially, when I came into this review, I was going to frame this through the usual lens I look at most of my reviews through. How I've tried to finish this game many times and never found the urge to actually get to the end. How it never seemed like there was anything glaringly wrong with the game, I'd rather just lose interest and move on to something else. Or how the literal pile of quality of life improvements over the first game can't save this game from being a slowly paced slog. And while I will touch on all of those issues I have with the game, I don't want to throw a bunch of issues at you and just complain for an entire video, because I genuinely do think this game is greater than the sum of its parts. I want to focus on the tonal shift of the series, starting with Dead Rising 2, and how different it is from the original, despite it being a direct sequel released over 4 years after the original game came out. An overwhelming darkness surrounds this game, directly contrasting the neon landscape of Fortune City, our new playground. Fortune City is the perfect location for our story this time around because of everything it represents. It's a sister city to Las Vegas, which means everything revolves around one central theme: money. Cash, entertainment, and the promise of hitting it big on the slots are what bring the herds of people to the city in the first place. And even after they're dead, scouring the earth for brains, we can still see the zombies still trying to test their luck on the slot machines. It's a shell of a place where lives have been destroyed by bad bets, with the signs and the bartenders calling people back to keep going. I hate casinos. Our leader into the city of crushed dreams is Chuck Greene, an equally crushed man. I don't know what to make of Chuck. He's about as exciting as a block of wood, and his personality can be described as someone sitting down to write a story about a cowboy, falling asleep for 6 weeks and missing their deadline, and turning in a single post-it note that had "Cowboy" written on it. He's a quiet, brooding dude with a jawline that could slice concrete. But on the flip side of that coin, his wife was killed in an outbreak in Las Vegas, leaving him as the sole guardian of his infected daughter Katie, so I also can't imagine being a gleaming beacon of light in those circumstances either. Also, everyone hates him, like to an aggressive extent. Strangers will walk up and start dunking on him.
Hey, buddy. I heard you lost your wife in Vegas. I guess you suck at killing zombies, otherwise she'd still be around!
Chuck never interjects where he doesn't feel like he needs to. In fact, he barely talks at all. The only time he's overly vocal is when he's making awful puns after killing bosses.
Now, I'm twice the man you are. I saw what you did there.
Which kinda makes me feel like he's just as fucked up as the people who lost their heads post-Outbreak. In 2021, when we're smack dab in the middle of the era of sad white dad main characters, Chuck is easily the shallowest of all of his kin. But when the game came out in 2010, he was part of a crew who ushered in the trend. Chuck is also the antithesis of Frank West, our bombastic photojournalist from the first game, where Frank is an independent, outspoken presence who makes the decision to travel to the center of the outbreak to chase the story. Chuck is a hardened father whose only concern is Katie and making sure she has the Zombrek she needs to keep from becoming one of the beasts that bit her. Frank West bursts onto the scene with all the subtlety of an ignited power keg, insisting you'll know his name by the end of the story.
It's Frank. Frank West. Remember that name, because the whole world's gonna know it in 3 days.
He carries himself like he's the center of the universe, demanding you hear what he has to say, making him the perfect ambassador into the chaos. And while he maintains his arrogance and his sarcasm throughout the game to get the facts for the story through interacting with others, he is still affected by the atrocities he participates in and witnesses before him. He doesn't play off somebody falling on their own chainsaw for goofs. And for me, that is one of the reasons I love Dead Rising 1 so much. It walks the line between campiness 1 second and tragedy the next. It shows us that while we're having fun and goofing around now, we're never that far from the next horror. Chuck Greene, in contrast, doesn't want to be the main character of a story. Rather, he's thrust into the spotlight after he's framed for causing the outbreak in Fortune City. He just wanted to lie low and bide his time until the rescue, but now he faces life in prison if he doesn't expose himself to the zombies to clear his name. And as his own real soft personality trait is his infected daughter, she's his sole purpose for being in Fortune City in the first place. In order to fund Katie Zombrecht's prescription, Chuck has to compete in an action reality TV show called Terror is Reality, where he must slay more zombies than his opponents to win prize money. Looking back now that the story is over, I can't imagine the feeling Chuck must have forced to kill more zombies, because to him they're not just the undead, they were someone's family, just like his wife was before she turned. But to save his daughter, he has no choice, and he'd put his head down and do it again if he had to. Even if he wins the show, everyone dunks on him for performing terribly under pressure, which makes no sense, but again, everyone hates Chuck. Especially Sullivan. Once the show ends and Chuck is trying to return to Katie backstage, the zombie outbreak begins and Katie in his arms, Chuck races to the safe house where he meets Sullivan for the first time. Our guardian angel Kenny Rogers over here notices that Katie was bitten and Chuck bluffs his way into saying he has Zombrex for her, but here's the thing, he doesn't. So once Katie is settled in the security room, Chuck must re-enter Fortune City to get more for her. Zombrex becomes a central part of the game as Katie needs a dose every 24 hours between 7 and 8 a.m., which means Chuck and Katie never get to sleep in, even on weekends. Finding multiple doses of Zombrex was a really controversial addition to the game when it first came out, and I remember being really annoyed by it when I first played the game 10 or so years ago. But for some reason this time around I didn't find it all that bad. I either naturally found a bunch hidden around the map or just bought a dose every time I got the money I needed to buy it at the ever-increasing prices from the pawn shop. By the end of the game I had Zombrex left over, even after giving doses to survivors I found around Fortune City that had been bitten. Sure, it wasn't ideal to go back to the safe house every time I needed to give Katie a dose, but more often than not the next case file started there anyway within a few minutes of giving it to her. After killing off a few looters trying to take advantage of the situation, Chuck finds a bit of Zombrex for Katie, enough to get her through the next day. After returning to the safe house and giving Katie her shot, Chuck is relaxing and sipping a fresh cup of joe with Stacy Forsythe, the leader of the anti-hate group for zombies advocating for ethical treatment of the undead, CURE. On the news, reporter Rebecca Chang, covering the story live within the city, is breaking the news that a video leaked of the bomb that let the Zambos loose into the city, and the presumed perpetrator is Chuck Greene, who is in cahoots with CURE to make a statement. Shocked and appalled at the development, Chuck sets out to clear his name. Only Sullivan stands in his way, threatening to kick Katie and Chuck out for treason and terrorism. But after begging for the chance to clear his name, the two strike a deal that as long as Chuck keeps bringing back survivors to the safe house, he's free to come and go as he pleases to gather evidence. He has 3 days to clear his name before the military comes in and saves those who survived. And if you played the first Dead Rising, you might be excited or spiteful at the return of the survivor rescue objectives. Much like Otis from the first game, Stacy watches the security cameras and updates you as she spots survivors scattered throughout the city. I was stunned at how much more enjoyable and easy these glorified escort missions were. In the first game, survivors were inept, weak, and easily distracted. In Dead Rising 2, I'd feel comfortable playing as any of these people. They were often armed and willing to fight, and where I could only escort 1 or 2 people comfortably in the first game, I was easily commanding 5 of them at a time in this one. A lot of the quality of life improvements also came in these escort missions because zombies did not continually cause damage if the survivors get grabbed, and they can even fight out of the zombies' grasp themselves without you having to double back to get them. The greatest addition of all, in my opinion, is the indicator that tells you if a survivor is close enough to move on to the next area without getting left behind. It saves you from the headache and guesswork of dealing with a loading screen, realizing your survivor was too far away, going back to the area, loading screen and all, and waiting until they get close enough before you finally look at another loading screen to go to the area you wanted to go to in the first place. It's so streamlined here. Now I get it, an escort mission is an escort mission no matter how you spin it, and if you hate these kinds of things, no amount of streamlining is going to change it. But these survivors were so competent that for one of the boss battles, I took one of them, gave him a shotgun, and he helped me fight off the baddie from afar. It was awesome. Before leaving the safe house to seek out Rebecca Chang to clear his name, Sullivan gives Chuck the key to the maintenance rooms where he can get his supplies. This opens up the biggest new feature of gameplay and combat, craftable weapons. When I first played Dead Rising 2 on release, I remember thinking craftable items was a gimmick, something that wouldn't really stick. I didn't particularly enjoy carrying around useless items in my inventory, hoping to find something to combine them with, but this time around I really set out to give these weapon combos a chance, trying to wipe my mind of my preconceived notions about them, and I found them to be an absolute treat. Instead of wasting inventory slots with raw materials to hopefully make something down the road, I treated each of the 35 maintenance rooms as their own little Zelda treasure chest, if you will. Each of the rooms has raw materials in them to make a specific weapon, or in some cases, a few weapons, so even if you've managed to destroy everything and walk in empty-handed, dipping into the nearest maintenance room means you won't be helpless for long. I tried to go into every single room I could to see the many different combos I could put together, and it was exciting to find new things I hadn't already unlocked. While you can get new combo cards, as they're called, as you level up, you don't have to wait to get these cards to actually combine items into weapons. Additionally, every object you can pick up that has a combo potential is marked with a green wrench icon, so you can really spend a ton of time trying to combine different things into new weapons. I genuinely had a lot of fun with these, and I was always carrying at least a few different combo weapons with me at all times for different purposes. For instance, fire weapons didn't do a ton of damage to zombies because they're unfazed by it, but they did massive damage to bosses I came across, so it was worth keeping them. Plus, finding some cool combos made the game a lot more manageable. Like combining a flashlight and a computer tower created a money hacker that could be used to steal cash out of ATMs and slot machines, which made the pursuit of Zombrex a much easier pill to swallow. But the weapons, oh my god, the weapons were fun. Gems and a flashlight create a literal freaking lightsaber. Combining a saw and a stack of porcelain plates creates a plate launcher that shoots plates that shatter and tear zombies to pieces. One plate alone can kill 3 or 4 zombies at once, and it's fun and satisfying to use. My one small complaint about them is that you're basically forced to use combo weapons if you want to level up quickly. They grant you extra experience for kills, which makes using random items you can grab a bit pointless sometimes. Even though the firearms were actually useful in this game and mapped to buttons that made sense, I found myself discouraged from using them because while the shotgun blows zombies away, I wasn't getting nearly as much experience as I would from the spiked baseball bat or the Defiler, a combo of a sledgehammer and axe. But given how much fun I was having, it wasn't really that big of a problem. It does kind of defeat the purpose of the "you're trapped in a mall, use what you can find" kind of mentality that made Dead Rising 1 so exciting. But given Chuck's background as a motocross rider and mechanic, it makes sense that he would be able to use some of his ingenuity to craft weapons. But now that we're in Fortune City, everyday items from around the mall might not have cut it anyway. There's up to 7,000 zombies on screen in any given area, especially in larger spaces. You're going to need some extra firepower. Our new playground is massive, but at the same time it feels claustrophobic, likely due to how many zombies are closing in on you at any given moment, just waiting to take a bite out of Chuck. I don't like our new location nearly as much as I liked Willamette, Colorado from the first game, but a part of me feels like that was the point. The city lies to you by telling you there's a ton to do, but no matter how you spin it, every casino is just a big room with a bunch of slot machines at the heart of it. I never felt like I had my bearings because of how similarly most of the areas looked, but again, that might be deliberate. Casinos by design are labyrinthian, begging you to get lost and walk in circles to ensure you never leave too soon. The neon lights of the strip disorient you, and when you think you figured out your way without the map, you're stuck in the wrong casino yet again. After meeting up with Rebecca Chang in the hotel in Fortune City, Chuck has to do some serious explaining to get Chang to believe he's not the one behind all this. The two decide to team up to uncover the truth. After breaking into the security room, Rebecca and Chuck discover that TK, the host of Terror's Reality, is using the outbreak to cover up the fact that he's robbing all 4 of the major casinos in the city before trying to disappear. Chuck then races to the underground to confront TK, who just flat out admits to framing him. Big reveal, huh? It's after this that I started to wish Rebecca was the main character of this story. She's independent, outspoken, and knows her way around a pistol. Armed with a lockpick and a drive to break the story, she's out to get any info she can, despite her camera crew running off and leaving her for dead out of fear for their own lives. She steals every scene she's in, and overall she seemed to be doing more interesting things than Chuck throughout the entire game. She's basically at the center of everything that gets uncovered. Most of the game begins to feel like we're running on her schedule as we wait for her to introduce us to her sources, and waiting for her to find out that TK is trying to escape the city with a helicopter. For a protagonist, Chuck doesn't seem like he takes much stock in uncovering the truth behind his innocence because of how involved everyone else seems to be in uncovering the facts instead of him. It makes the game feel slow, and now that I look back, I feel like the story is a lot of what prevented me from finishing the game so many times before, and mostly it feels like little more than continuously stopping TK's heists. It's much weaker of a plot than the first game, and it truly takes forever to get started. In fact, I didn't even feel invested in it until the third act when the big twist comes into play. TK's framing of Chuck turned out to be the tip of the iceberg. Once the military invades to rescue survivors and eradicate the zombies, a mysterious green gas starts to emerge from beneath the city, mutating the zombies into gas zombies. These extra pissed, extra strong zombies that spit at you to disorient you. The military is overrun and killed. Realizing TK didn't have the resources to produce this much gas in high quantities, Rebecca sets off underground to investigate, where she is knocked out by the final surviving military leader. Chuck goes underground after her and fights the commander, one of the many boss battles in the game. The bosses in this game are fundamentally different from the ones in the previous game. I found in the first game it shows what people grab onto as humanity starts to slip away, rationally or irrationally. Not every single one of the bosses had depth, but where the depth was, it was welcome. I'll never forget Cliff, the retired war vet who falls into a nightmare thanks to his PTSD. Most of the bosses in Dead Rising 2 remind me of the opportunist in the first game who seizes control of some survivors to become a bloodlusting cult leader, also known as Kevin Spacey playing himself. These bosses feel like they were evil all along, just waiting for the right moment to show it. There's a chef who makes meals out of humans for a pending restaurant review, despite the fact that there's plenty of lobster and steak around he could have used. There's future Capitol Hill stormers who hunt survivors from the rooftops for the sake of purifying the nation. They're all likely responsible for Dead Rising 2 feeling like a much darker game than the first. Once we defeat Cliff in Dead Rising 1, we see a photo of him and his grandkids, showing that he was a pretty normal guy. And had he not been caught in the middle of this, he'd probably be continuing on with his normal life. There's a certain optimism in the first game that, if Frank can just break the story, the people who caused this will pay for what they did, and things will get better. But the sequel takes place 5 years after the first game, and now Frank's story has failed to fix anything. People are living with the threat of an outbreak in their daily lives. This fear and hate has festered for years at this point, and you can really see the evil that was thriving just beneath the surface, and this evil is only further reinforced by the climax of the story. After saving Rebecca from her captor, the two return to the safe house where, upon further discussion, they determine the gas is coming from the underground. Chuck sets out to investigate and finds all the zombies being attracted to the secret hub hidden beneath Fortune City that attracts queens. The hornet-like bugs that, if squashed, kill the zombies in its direct radius. Before Chuck can even get any bearings on what he's looking at, some mercenaries with guns shoot a high-frequency wave at the horde of zombies and cause their heads to burst, releasing the queens into the air and have them sucked up by the capturing system in the middle of the room. After making do and killing the mercs, he can take their gun, and if you shoot it at people, they puke instantaneously. Greatest weapon of all time. After disposing of the scientists in the underground lab and being sure they die on an empty stomach, Chuck finds a laptop with all the information detailing the outbreak. After Chuck grabs the laptop, he returns to the safe house where he, Stacy, and Rebecca go through and find the truth. Phenotrans, the mega pharmaceutical company that produces Zombrex, actually orchestrated the entire Fortune City outbreak in order to drive up demand for Zombrex by getting more and more people bitten. And now that we're in the middle of a pandemic and real-life companies are hoarding the wealth on vaccines and refusing to share their patents and preventing mass production that would help us all get out of this hellscape, I don't know, y'all, it doesn't seem that far-fetched to me. And as Rebecca pulls out a phone Chuck found to call her station, Sullivan puts a bullet in her head. It turns out Phenotrans used TK and Sullivan as moles to get them access to the underground and set up their little operation, and they work together to pin the entire thing on Chuck and Cure. Chuck would have a believable motive too, which Phenotrans and TK want to take advantage of. The Las Vegas outbreak that killed Chuck's wife? Phenotrans orchestrated that one too. They just didn't count on Chuck to survive this new outbreak that they'd say he caused. He manages to outsmart and outlast every single attempt to kill him, whether it be TK's mercs attempting to shoot him, or Sullivan trying to cap Chuck himself. I just wish we would have seen this resilience and drive in Chuck's personality. The Chuck we see throughout the first two acts compared to the final chapter are two different people. The first 2 acts show a desperate person who's just trying to clear his name so he can go back to life with his daughter. In the final act, he's the sole representative standing for the people stomped out by corporate greed, and he's the last hope at getting victory for the little guy. In the final showdown between Chuck and Sullivan, we see Sully standing on a pedestal looking down on Chuck, another person he's ready to squash for the sake of saving the best of us. But just as Chuck deemed it necessary to kill 1,000 zombies beneath him and countless other people along this journey to clear his name, Sullivan insists the Fortune City outbreak was exactly that, necessary. In Chuck's case, the zombies and bosses happen to be at the bottom of the totem pole, and as players we're fine with it. They're just zombies, right? But as soon as Phenotrans kills thousands of humans, we despise them for their actions. The fact is, there's always going to be someone with different needs and interests and experiences than you do, and how you treat them shows more about you than how you treat the people with your same needs. But both Chuck and Sullivan treat humans and zombies as necessary death tolls to achieve their interests, showing that, while what they want might be different, they're really similar in what they'll do to get what they need.
Open your eyes, Chuck. Do you have any idea how many people are affected in this country? Doctors, politicians, CEOs. Some of our country's best are infected. Even your little girl, Chuck. What would happen to your cute little time bomb if she didn't get her drug? Fortune City was a small price to pay to ensure our country's way of life.
You murdered these people!
Acceptable losses. This wasn't the first time, and it won't be the last.
Had the game ended here, I think the showdown would have hit really hard. Only since this is a Dead Rising game, there are alternate paths you can take and different endings to discover. I apparently did the wrong thing by giving TK Zombrex after he was bitten by a zombie, and I got a fake ending that leads to overtime mode. The temporarily cured TK kidnaps Stacy and Katie, and Chuck has to fight him to save them. However, the true ending only comes if Chuck refuses to give TK Zombrex and ends on a cliffhanger where the TK zombie has Chuck pinned as the chopper that could have saved him flies away. This ending is the canon ending and leads to Case West, a standalone DLC where Frank West returns, saves Chuck from the TK zombie, and they go on an adventure together for only $9.99. To me, the ending where Chuck does the right thing by giving up Zombrex and it isn't the intended finale is Dead Rising 2 in a nutshell, in both story and the handling of Chuck. Even with the weight of the final battle between Frank and Sullivan, I wish I had a more emotional attachment to the guy. I knew what he was supposed to stand for, but I didn't think he was the right person to be standing there. He has no empathy for anyone, cares for nothing but his daughter, and he's a brick when it comes to depth. And the length of time it takes to get to the battle with Sullivan feels like they started with the premise first and worked their way backward into a story. I'm not saying that's what happened, but it certainly wouldn't surprise me. The good part takes forever to get to, and I wouldn't blame anyone for giving up early like I have countless times. This game gets all the themes right, but Chuck is not the person we need him to be in my opinion, and this story is a bunch of filler until we reach the final moment where we finally see the point of the game. And that's what makes it hard for me to care. And there are plenty of arguments online I found while I was researching this that explain why Chuck was great, but I just don't agree at all. Feel free to explain your reasoning in the comments down below if you'd like. I'd love to have a civil discussion about him. And you might be asking why I don't just play off the record since it's just Dead Rising 2 with Frank West. And I've tried to play that too. I just find it hard to play a game that isn't canon in a series I like. Playing a game that ultimately means nothing isn't worth the time, although I do imagine I'll play it for the channel. I just can't look at the game and care that much because even when it came out, there was no, I wonder what this implication means for the series, because the story of Frank West in Fortune City never happened. As a Dead Rising game on the gameplay side of things, the base sequel is on brand, while also giving a compelling reason for why the combat is taken up a notch. The combo weapons are a truly exciting addition, and while you might come across something totally useless, at the very least it's always interesting. Like a mask that has a sparkler shoved in it that does nothing but attract zombies. It doesn't do much unless you match it with something else, but at least it looks cool doing it. The stress of time constraints are as core to the gameplay as possible, which makes completing the game 100% a nightmare. But for me, I like it because it shows the difficult decisions we have to make and emphasizes the difficulty of being the only person who can save everyone. And even with how much easier escorting survivors is this time around, There are still times when you got 2 missions to save people and they're on opposite sides of the map with the clock ticking. You still have to make the tough calls. And this time around, the time constraints are only more prevalent with the Zombrex necessity nagging at you. But by the time you're done with the game, you probably hate Phenotrans even more for making you deal with the damn thing. Dead Rising isn't Dead Rising without the tick-tock of time at the center of everything, and the fear of losing the story if the clock runs out is massively important to what makes the feeling of tension, and I'm so glad they've kept it through the entire series. It would never consider removing it.
In this game, in 4, are we going to see, the same traditional like day and night cycles and like a hard day limit for when you have to be finished with the game?
No. So we've taken the time away.
Fuck. Dead Rising 2 is a sequel made for fans of the original. It does little to draw in anyone who didn't like the first game, while I think it also polarizes fans of the original too. But where I see a lot of people claiming Dead Rising 3 is where the series got dark while the gameplay got wilder, I wholly disagree. These dark roots and wacky gameplay are already digging themselves in here. That's hopefully what you got out of this video. It's a really dark game. That may be for you, and it may not be, depending on what you're looking for, but for me it left me wanting more, but not in the way the first one does. The story and Frank were what kept me going, and getting thrust into chaos almost immediately is what hooked me in. I don't have to wait hours and hours to care about Frank or the story. But now that I've finished Dead Rising 2 and still want more, I might just have to jump into Off the Record sooner rather than later. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you making it this far into it. I've got videos coming out all week, so be sure to subscribe. Hit the bell icon to make sure you never miss one of my uploads. If you like the video, be sure to leave a like on it, and if you want to talk about Dead Rising 2 or any of the Dead Rising games, be sure to leave a comment down below and we'll have a talk about it. If you want to go even further and support the channel, you can look in the description for my Patreon account. Even $1 a month really helps me. It goes a long way, so I'd really appreciate it if you checked it out. I got a ton of cool perks, a ton of exclusive content, and a lot of cool, like, handwritten things as rewards. Anyway, I'll be back next week, so see you then.